All right, let's dive in. Today we're taking a trip to the Emerald Isle for a deep dive into something a little bit different, you know?
Oh, this should be fun.
We're going to be looking at Irish place names,
Okay.
but not just any place names. We're talking about the ones that sound a bit, well, a bit rude to English speakers.
I see where we're going with this.
Exactly. So imagine you're, planning a road trip through Ireland,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're checking out the map, and all of a sudden you come across a town called, well, let's just say it might make you do a double take.
Yeah, language can be a funny thing, can it?
Yeah.
Especially when you're dealing with translations and different cultures and all that.
Okay, so spill the tea. What's the story behind these seemingly rude Irish place names?
Well, the thing is, they're not actually rude at all in their original Gaelic form.
Oh, so that's all in the translation.
Exactly. It's when these Gaelic names get phonetically translated, or what we call anglicized. They can sometimes take on these unintended and, let's be honest, often hilarious connotations in English.
So it's like a linguistic game of telephone,
Huh. That's a great way to put it.
where the message gets a little, well twisted along the way.
Right. Like our source mentioned, they didn't actually give us any specific examples of these place names, but they talked about this contrast, how the English interpretations can be so different from the original Gaelic meanings.
Yeah. Makes me think, like, if you were just glancing at a map, you might totally miss the real meaning behind these names.
Oh, absolutely. It's like there's this whole other layer of history and culture hidden beneath the surface.
All right, so no teasing. Give us some examples. I'm dying to know what some of these places are actually called.
Okay, well, get ready to chuckle. Let's start with Muff in County Donegal.
Muff. Okay, I can already see where this is going.
Okay. Now, to an English speaker, that might sound a bit, well, cheeky, right? But in Gaelic, it's actually Muff, which simply means plain.
Wow. Muff to muff. That is quite the transformation. All right, what else have you got?
Okay, how about this one, Bastardstown in County Wexford?
Whoa! They actually call a place that.
They do. But don't worry, it's not as scandalous as it sounds. The name actually comes from the Anglo-Norman name Ballybastard, which just refers to a settlement that was owned by the Le Bastard family.
Oh, wow. So it's like a little history lesson and a good laugh all rolled into one.
Precisely.
Okay, you've got to have at least one more up your sleeve. Come on.
All right, one more. How about Crotty's Rock in County Waterford?
Crotty's Rock. I can see how that one might raise a few eyebrows.
It does, doesn't it? But the name actually comes from the Irish word croit, which means hump or small hill.
So basically, it's just a rocky hill, nothing more, nothing less.
Exactly. And yet just that slight shift in pronunciation can completely change the way we perceive it.
It's amazing, isn't it, how these subtle changes in pronunciation can take a word from completely innocent to something, well, a bit more suggestive.
Yeah, it really highlights how much context matters when it comes to language and meaning.
Makes you wonder if there's a downside to all this. Like, are we missing out on the original beauty of these Gaelic names because we're too busy snickering at the English versions?
That's a really interesting point, and it's something to think about for sure. I mean, while most people might see the humor in these place names, some might argue that it's kind of disrespectful to the Gaelic culture,
Right. It's like reducing these places to just a punchline.
Exactly. And we might be missing out on the richness and the depth of their true meaning because we're too focused on the English interpretation.
It's like that saying lost in translation.
Yes. And it's a good reminder to, try to appreciate the complexity of language and to be aware of how our own cultural perspectives can shape how we understand things.
This whole thing is making me think about traveling in Ireland in a completely different way. It's not just about seeing the sights. It's about understanding the stories behind the names on the map and the echoes of history and language that they carry.
I couldn't agree more, And who knows, maybe you'll even stumble upon some of these quirky place names on your own adventures.
I'm definitely keeping my eyes peeled. But for now, let's shift gears a bit. Our source also mentioned some other fascinating linguistic quirks in Ireland, and I'm really curious to hear more about them. So, what kind of quirks are we talking about here?
Well, for starters, have you ever heard the phrase giving out?
Giving out. Honestly, it sounds more like, someone's scolding a kid or something.
Right. But in Ireland, it actually means complaining or nagging.
Oh, wow. Really? So, like, if someone says she was giving out yards about the weather.
Exactly. They mean she was complaining a lot about it.
That's hilarious. I can just imagine the confusion for someone who's not in the know.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely one of those phrases that can trip people up.
It's like a secret code.
It is a bit like a secret code. And it's not just the words themselves, but also how they're used. You
Yeah.
know, like take the word grand, for example.
Grand.
So in most contexts, grand means something, impressive or magnificent. But in Ireland, they use it more casually, almost like, okay, we're fine.
Interesting. So if someone asks you how you're doing and you say grand, you're not necessarily feeling like royalty.
Exactly. It's more about conveying this sense of ease,
Yeah.
like everything's all right.
It's all about understanding the nuances.
Precisely. The nuances of the language and the culture.
This is reminding me of a time I was in Dublin and I overheard someone say, I'm off to get the messages.
Ah, the classic messages.
And I was so confused. I thought they were talking about like checking their voicemail or something.
Huh. Yeah, that one gets a lot of visitors. But in Ireland, getting the messages just means going grocery shopping.
Wow, I had no idea. I felt like I'd step into some kind of alternate reality where words have totally different meanings.
It's all part of the adventure, isn't it?
It is. It makes the whole experience so much more memorable.
Exactly. It's like a crash course in a whole new way of speaking.
Speaking of crash courses, our source also mentioned something about Irish proverbs. Yeah, those proverbs, I've always found them so interesting. They always seem to have this mix of like wisdom and humor.
Oh, they really do. There's one that I always think of. It's a good laugh and a long sleep are the two best cures.
Isn't that the truth? It's so simple, but it's like a good reminder to just, relax and not take things too seriously.
Exactly. Sometimes you just need a good laugh and a good night's sleep to put things in perspective.
I love that. Okay, so what other gems of wisdom have you come across?
Well, there's another one that's kind of fitting for our conversation today. It is better to spend money like there's no tomorrow than to spend tonight like there's no money.
Ooh, I like that one. It's like saying, live in the moment. Don't
Yeah.
be afraid to experience new things.
Right. And I think that applies to more than just money, It's
Yeah.
about embracing life and all its quirks and not being afraid to step outside your comfort zone.
It's like exploring these interesting Irish place names.
Yeah. Exactly. It's all about having a sense of adventure and being open to new experiences.
It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of Irish language and culture today.
Oh, we've barely dipped our toes in. There's still so much more to discover: the music, the storytelling, the people. It's an endlessly fascinating place.
Well, I guess that just means we'll have to do another deep dive sometime. But for now, I think we've given our listeners plenty to ponder.
Indeed. So, dear listener, as you go about your day, keep your ears open for those little linguistic quirks, the unexpected turns of phrase that make language so intriguing. And if you ever find yourself in Ireland, don't be afraid to embrace the unexpected. You might just stumble upon a town with a name that makes you chuckle, or you might strike up a conversation with a local who teaches you a new slang word.
The important thing is to approach it all with an open mind and a sense of humor. After all, as the Irish proverb goes, a stranger is only a friend you haven't met yet.
Well said. Until next time, slan go foil.